This is by far the scariest experience I've ever had in my life, and it wasn't even me being stalked. It was my ex-girlfriend 4 years ago. We were both 18 and just started a community college nearby. Our schedules were pretty similar. We intentionally put 2 of our 5 classes with each other and took lunch off at the same time so we could eat with a group of our mutual friends in our social group, and we saw each other a lot. A month and a half into school, my girlfriend starts to tell me that she noticed a guy who's following her around campus, and she describes him as somebody who looks like he works there, whatever that means. I asked her to recount some particular instances, and the only ones she told me were that he has waited outside the library for her to finish her schoolwork for the past week, and that on her way to her car, she always saw him sitting on the same bench, facing the direction she parks in. I was admittedly a bit concerned, but it is college. Everybody has a routine. Maybe his plan was to wait for someone outside the library and then go sit on a bench. I tell her that I'll go to the library during her study hour with her and I'll do some of my work. And if the guy has ill intentions, he'll back off once he sees me with her. Now, it's important to note that I don't appear to be physically intimidating at all. I'm pretty slender and don't look muscular. I figured I probably wasn't going to scare somebody away, but it was worth a shot, and it comforted her at the same time. We go to study, and we're sitting in front of the glass windows that separate the library from the hallway. Suddenly, she nudges my notebook and whispers, while still looking down at her work. He's watching us. Look by the staircase doors. I look over and I see a guy who's at most 35 years old. I figure there's no way he works there. He looks too young. Couldn't tell if he was in his late 20s or early 30s, but he looks simultaneously youthful but experienced, if that makes any sense. Not somebody you'd expect to be stalking somebody or anything. He had a messenger bag with him, so I figured he might have been a student. Me thinking quickly and wanting to see if this guy was really stalking my girlfriend, told her to get up and pretend to leave. I told her to leave the library and go downstairs towards the cafe. She listens and gets about 30 seconds down the hall, where the guy starts following behind. I immediately know something's up with this guy and he's stalking my girlfriend. I rush out of the library and he's only a few meters down the hallway, so as casually as possible, I spark a conversation with this dude, pretending like I recognize him from somewhere. I asked him if I could walk with him and he said sure. He and I walked downstairs and my girlfriend was almost never out of sight. He probably followed 15 meters behind her the whole way down to the cafeteria. He sits down at a table and I pretend like I have to keep walking and just say the formalities. Goodbye and nice meeting you and such. As soon as I get outside the door, call my girlfriend and tell her to come out there. He was following her. She is really suspicious of me now because I was acting weird. I told her once she get outside to come around the corner of the building. The doorway is right near the corner, so that he couldn't see where she walked to from inside and would attempt to come around here looking for her. Lo and behold, he comes out about a minute after her and turns into us. I'm standing with her and he's looking at the two of us. And all I say is, "Why the heck are you following my girlfriend?" He played it off as a coincidence, but then ramped up the harassment. He texted her that night saying something like, "Why the heck was your boyfriend so mouthy with me today?" She didn't know who he was until she texted him, "Wrong number," and he replied with, "No, it's not, on campus." He started putting letters and gifts in her mailbox and slashed my tires, but stopped waiting outside the library. I hadn't seen him for weeks at this time, but he was completely terrorizing my girlfriend and I was helpless about it this time because he was invisible. He was hiding in plain sight apparently, but we never saw him. I was ready to seriously hurt this guy. Last night I saw this guy, I was staying at my girlfriend's house and her family was out late visiting some of her more distant family that lived about an hour away. It was just us in her house and we heard a window shatter. We locked her bedroom door and called the police, who instructed her to stay on the phone with them. We had no idea who it was. All that was clear was that somebody just broke into her house. I carry a knife almost everywhere with me, so I just got that out. It's a little knife I got as a bachelor gift for my brother's wedding, but I was ready to seriously hurt somebody if they tried hurting me or my girlfriend at this point. We hear him walking around outside the door. Suddenly, he starts opening other doors in the house but never closing them. He checks the pantry, the basement door, his parents' room, and the bathroom. By the time he gets to her bedroom door, we're well aware he's nearby. We found out it was him when he jiggled the door handle and realized it was locked. He started saying, "Oh, what's wrong, honey? Are you scared now? I bet you wish that you could call your boyfriend and that he was here to protect your pretty self." Then he kicks the door so hard that the bottom panel cracks. It's not broken, just a giant crack in the wood, and she screams. I just yell out, "I am here, you frickin' weirdo, and you'll breathe your last breaths in this room if you come in. Get out of this house and leave us alone." In as intimidating a voice as I'm able to muster. I was scared too. Luckily, just as I said that, the police came and arrested the guy. The window he smashed was the sliding door on her back porch. My girlfriend was severely shaken up, and I was just crying a lot. I was really scared, but at the time, I had a ton of adrenaline running through me. I was really ready to kill a person that night, and that mindset is something I will forever remember. Once you are actually in a situation where you might have to defend yourself and kill somebody, you really begin to understand how much animal instinct dictates your behavior. It's terrifying to even know I was capable of thinking that way. My ex-girlfriend and I are still very close friends to this day, but we don't talk about this ever. I know her memory of this still messes with her because she sometimes sends me paranoid text messages about seeing someone looking at her. The saddest thing that she'd sent me was that she's afraid to go into her house because she walked in and all the doors were wide open, like the guy left them that night. She's terrified of doors being open around her because she thinks people could be hiding in those rooms or that somebody was searching for her. We broke up for reasons unrelated to this, but I still love her as a friend, and she will always be my closest friend. We very well could have died that night. I'm really happy that she told me about this guy when she did too. The price of tires is infinitely less important to me than her life. The guy ended up being a recidivist who had been in prison before breaking into a girl's house that he'd been stalking before stalking laws actually existed, so he was only charged with breaking and entering. How the heck do these people get released back into the public, dude? They should be treated at a psych hospital. He didn't have anything with him the night of the break-in except for a box of trash bags in his car. John and I were home alone, which never happens. John is my husband, and we have 3 kids. Our oldest was at a friend's house for the night, and my mom had the boys. I was stoked. I started drinking. John doesn't drink, and dancing and running around in the backyard while he chased me around. Alone time is a precious commodity, and I was determined to have fun. We live on a heavily wooded 4-acre piece of land a few miles away from town. I love it because it's beautiful and quiet, and I can blast Kill Switch, engage on my deck in the middle of the night and have little bonfires. And no one complains. A few yards from my deck is a little above ground pool. It's just big enough for me to float on my back and watch the stars on warm, clear nights, which is just about the best thing ever for me. A few weeks ago, John bought these little solar lights that float on the surface and flash colors, red, yellow, green, and blue, when it gets dark. On even a moderately sunny day, those things absorb enough sunlight to go until at least 3 a.m. At this point, I got drunk enough that I was running in and out of the house, sometimes to stand on the deck and smoke while watching the pool lights glitter in the water, sometimes to jump in and watch the stars. It was around 11 when I ripped my clothes off and yelled at John to come join me in the pool. He laughed as he went to grab a towel because apparently he is too good for drip drying. I skipped up the ladder and into the pool. In my inebriated state, it took me a minute to figure out something was different. When John walked out and stood on the deck, silhouetted by the dining room light that lit the sliding glass door, it finally occurred to me. "Hey," I yelled, too loudly. "These freaking pool lights are going bad. They're already out." He pulled off his shirt. "What?" Suddenly, the outline of my husband froze. "Babe," a quiet, urgent voice said. "Come here now." I was confused but started to climb the ladder. Apparently I wasn't fast enough because he bolted off the deck to the pool and yanked me out. As soon as the door was locked behind us, he grabbed me by the dripping wet shoulders, turned off the light, and told me to look outside. It took me a moment, but then I saw it. The lights, red, yellow, green, and blue, are being carried away from the pool and slowly deeper into the trees. I like to think that it was some kind of kid messing with us. Probably was, but at the same time, wow. My great-grandmother was born in 1913 in Ukraine. In 1932, when she was 19, something called the Holodomor took place, extermination by hunger. This was recognized years later as genocide of Ukrainian people by the Soviet Union. Millions died. And as you might expect during a famine, cannibalism became rampant. It wasn't unheard of, great-grandma told me, for families to kill the youngest child in order to eat. As time passed and the famine ended, things seemed to get better, but food was still scarce. It cost a lot just for the basics: milk, eggs, bread, etc. It also took a lot of time, as these things weren't easy to find. Though it happened less, great-grandma was certain that people were resorting to easier, more sinister methods to obtain food. Great-grandma was pregnant with my grandfather in 1936, and she wanted fresh vegetables desperately. Sort of a pregnancy craving, I guess you could say. So, out she went, tracking up and down the streets. It looks like she wasn't going to have any luck, until... "Lady, you need something?" It was a small boy about 8 years old. His cheeks were unusually full, she remembered. Most people those days had cheekbones that looked like they would poke out of your face at any slight pressure. Grandma told the boy that she wanted vegetables, and his chubby face split into a grin. He knew just the place, he told her, and gave her directions to a hovel a few blocks down. She was wary but determined, so off she went. The hovel smelt like slaughter, but she didn't think anything of it. Maybe these people had a lot of food and she had struck a gold mine. Perhaps they would take pity on a pregnant woman and not charge her an astronomical price for a droopy carrot. When she pushed the curtain acting as a door aside and said hello, 3 things happened simultaneously. There was a man with a plank of wood raised above his head coming towards her. She caught sight of a human head lying on the table, causing her to scream, and the woman in the corner shouted, "Stop!" The woman examined my grandmother, frowning at her stomach. "Boy knows we have standards. We don't kill pregnant women. Go. Leave. Do not repeat what you saw. We can change our minds." Grandma didn't need to be told that again. She left and came to America years later to start a cannibalism-free life. I still wonder what would have happened had they not noticed she was pregnant. Sometimes it feels a bit embarrassing to say, but yes, I am a stripper. Not every day, as I only do it to pay tuition fees for my massage therapy course, but I work Saturday to Tuesday in the strip club. This one guy, I don't know his name, so I'll just call him Dave, comes in usually on Saturday at 11 p.m., throws $2 measly, and seems as if he's about to leave, but then just sits there on the red leather and stares at me as I do my tricks. He's not the usual sort of guy that we get in here. We usually get businessmen or just a hierarchy of people, really. But Dave straight up looks like your textbook definition of homeless. Long hair and beard, an old brown jacket, holey boots, and the lot. 2 hours passed and I've been doing my Gemini, Matrix, Sun Wheels, you name it, on repeat, and I do a little dance for the audience before I'm about to dress down and let Tasha take over, as my shift for the night is about done. I walk off and Tasha gets on the other podium when I get a sense somebody is watching me. I'm used to being stared at and watched, of course, but this stare does not feel the same way to me. I can just feel it's him. I ignore it and change into warmer clothes, put on my flats, take off my fake eyelashes, and leave at 1:30 p.m. to go home. As I'm walking, I get the feeling again. I'm close to my apartment now, and the girls and I have all been stalked before or followed to our cars. I don't have one, but never this far. It's also even worse for me as I'm a 5'6" petite girl, and nothing says vulnerable like short girls in the early hours of the morning. This guy had at least 6 inches on me, so I turn around and guess who? Dave. He sees me and gets this excited look and walks faster towards me. I book it onto the next street, a way busier one, and don't even bother to look back. I don't want to see his creepy ass face again. My apartment is on the first floor and it's coming up the next street. So I text my roommate Mike to let me in and be at the door, please. I sneak one peek back but see no sign of Dave and I keep walking. Mike is at the door. I duck in and tell him what has happened and he asks me if I want to call the cops. I brushed it off as it's probably just some lonely guy with nothing else to do. That night I got a knock on my window. It's pretty scary as we live on the first floor and my bedroom is at the side of our apartment with a big window. The street lamp outside reflects through my window and there's a big man's silhouette. I look out but there's no one. I call for Mike and he looks outside but finds no one. So I guess I must have been half awake and paranoid and go back to sleep. The next night I am woken up to a flashlight being shown in my room. I spun around and this time I called the culprit. Dave. I was beyond pissed. I gave him the finger and got out my phone to call the cops. He ran off and the cops came over a few minutes later. They suggested I install CCTV, but I'm pretty much broke, so they said they would do a patrol of a couple blocks and see if they can find anyone matching my description. It's Monday and I'm going home earlier at 10 o'clock. I have one of Mike's props guns on me. He does acting, not a real gun. When I'm opening my door and someone shouts, "Man, I just want a hug." Dave is out of breath and coming around the corner of where I've just come from. I instantly pull the gun from under my top and tell him to not come any closer. I keep it out of public view though, of course, as there are a couple of kids on the street. He puts his hands up and keeps walking closer. I back into my door and he's saying I'm not a bad man. I just really like you repeatedly when I shout. I have kids. Don't shoot me. He catches the attention of two women and their kids down the street, enough for him to run away. And I get inside and call Mike. We agree to swap bedrooms for the night and for once I actually got some sleep. I don't think I've ever been so grateful for a windowless bedroom. This was last night. Now I'm getting a taxi home and sleeping in Mike's room. That night around 3 a.m., if I remember exactly, we got knocks at the front door. Mike was still up, so he got up to open it and nobody was there. I got up and went and sat in the living room with him. These were pretty violent knocks and it went on for about an hour. We were at the back of the house overlooking our apartment complex garden when they kept knocking. And we eventually ignored it, knowing fully well who it was. Next, they rattled the garden gate, which was shut at this time, but directly next to us, so we craned our necks over the balcony to look. Dave. Mike was yelling at him to screw off, but he persisted to pull at the gate. We called the police again, and they came the next morning as Dave had already left. A few neighbors had complained too, so they called the company that owns our apartments and asked them to install some CCTV. He never came back to the strip club after that Saturday, and I have class today. But I tried to think about what he will pull tonight, and I seriously don't know what to do. I have no money to move because the deposits are way too high. Mike is putting in some drapes over my window. I don't know whether to call the cops again because I feel like I'm pestering them. So, please give me some advice. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 16 in my best friend's flat. It was around midnight and both of us were in her kitchen, dancing around and being silly in short shorts and bikini tops. Her mom was passed out on the sofa at the other end of the flat, bearing in mind she lives on the ground floor. After a few minutes we noticed an old car slowly driving past the window. We thought nothing of it really until we saw it come back and stop right outside. We thought maybe it was one of her neighbors, but it was a bit odd, as they were all quite old and probably wouldn't be driving that time of night. We just continued with what we were doing when her door buzzer went off. My best friend, without thinking, pressed the button to open the main door, not even asking who it was. When she opened her door, a tall, large, bald man dressed in old paint-splattered clothes walked up to us at the door. "You ordered a male escort," he said. I and my best friend looked at each other with confusion, and I said that no, we didn't order anyone and you have the wrong house. He kept edging his way closer into our doorway and said, "No, you definitely told me this address." We got really freaked out and asked him to leave, but he proceeded to tell us he was coming in and made his way right into the doorway. Just as he did, my friend's mom came to the door and asked him who he was. He backs right up from the door and starts stuttering, saying he got called to this address. She asks him what this address is, and he doesn't have a clue and just makes some street up. While he is stuttering, trying to think of somewhere, He apologizes and then leaves. I and my best friend are pretty shaken up, but decide it's a good idea not to prance around late at night, wearing not a lot of clothing. So, creepy escort man, let's not meet. This past New Year's was mine and my boyfriend's 4-year anniversary. We typically don't do much, so this year we decided to make it special by planning a romantic getaway. At the time, the two of us were living in Seattle and wanted to rent a cabin in a snowy small town for the weekend. We found a cabin on Airbnb with a hot tub and we were sold. The cabin was, of course, the last house on the road. To get to it, you had to drive down a small remote private road that ended up in a roundabout. Off the roundabout was a long uphill driveway leading up to our cabin. We got to the cabin and it was snowy and beautiful. The cabin itself sat on top of a garage and you needed to take stairs on the back side of the property to get to the front door. When we got inside, there was a booklet with all of the cabin's info outlined. The book said that during the snowy season, don't be surprised if their contracted snowplowers show up to clear off the driveway. Okay, sounds good. We unpacked and realized that there was no service on either of our phones. But the booklet told us there was a landline in the cabin if we needed anything. We spent the first night by the fire playing board games and drinking wine. The weekend was exactly what we needed. We planned to spend the next day in town, and that night I had booked us a reservation for a nice dinner. We were gone almost all day, only returning briefly to get dressed up to enjoy some good food. Dinner was great and we were excited to head back to the cabin for some champagne hot tubbing. While at dinner, the temperature had dropped and it snowed for the first time that day, coating everything in a fresh layer of powder. We drove down the private road and got to the driveway. At that point, my boyfriend stopped the car, headlights shining in front, and asked if I noticed the new tire tracks. I looked at the driveway, hoping to quickly disregard the new tire tracks, but there they were. Immediately, we remembered that the snowplowers could have stopped by. But the issue was we saw the tire tracks because of the snow, and who plows in the dark? We also knew that once we were at the cabin, we had no service on our cell phones, so we figured we would head back into town and message our Airbnb hosts and ask if they or one of their friends had stopped by the apartments. We waited for a while in town for a reply from our hosts, but didn't hear back. We could have called, but at that point it was past 10, and we didn't want to be bad guests. We figured we blew the whole thing out of proportion, and might as well head back to the cabin. After all, I am pretty big into true crime, spooky subreddits, and horror movies, so I was probably just psyching myself out, right? My boyfriend drove us back, and this time we actually drove up the driveway. Towards the top of the hill, part of the driveway, I noticed something. My stomach dropped as I noticed footprints on the property. We backed down the driveway and took a closer look to see if there were more footprints. From what it looked like, someone had driven up the driveway, reversed down, parked, and then gotten out of the car and walked onto the property. Since we had now also driven on the tracks, we couldn't find where the footprints ended. The property was quite large with tons of trees and brush, and we knew that these footprints could go anywhere. The moment we saw footprints, we decided to call the police. We figured it was better safe than sorry. We would just have the officer go onto the property with us to check everything out. We drove down the road till we got service, called the police, and waited for their arrival. The policeman showed up and we followed him onto the property. The police officer scanned the property and determined that there was no one out there. Obviously, we are a little shaken up and a lot embarrassed. We thanked the officer as he left. Needless to say, neither of us wanted to sit in the hot tub in the dark woods after what had happened. Instead, we locked the doors and watched a movie, champagneless. We were both tired from the day and passed out pretty quick. At 3 a.m., we both woke up on the couch with the TV on and the lights, laughing about how the night didn't turn out as planned. As my boyfriend went to brush his teeth, we heard a noise. It sounded mechanical and only lasted a few seconds. We looked at each other and froze. The garage door. There are very few reasons that somebody would need to open the garage door of a guest-occupied Airbnb at 3 a.m. Like I said, we woke up to all of our lights on, and the cabin had lots of windows. We knew that if somebody was outside, they knew we were here and they could see us. I immediately grabbed the landline and dialed 911. We sat crouched in the Airbnb, hoping for the police to arrive. We knew that whoever had made those tracks was still on the property, and this time they were making noise. As I sat talking to the operator, we heard a bang on our balcony as if somebody threw something up onto it. I was losing my cool when the operator told me the police were nearby. All of a sudden, they were there. We saw the police lights and watched them search the property. Soon we heard banging on the door. It was the police. We were going to be okay. At the door were two policemen, one in front of us and one a little behind, kind of kicking around snow and looking at the ground. I immediately noticed the police officer in the back as the officer that did the initial check on the property. The police officer told us that not only was the garage door shut, but it was locked. And again, there were no signs of somebody on the property. We discussed leaving, but the police officer said the road conditions were too dangerous that time of night. I looked at the police officer who had to come out to the property twice and felt I had deeply disappointed him. My boyfriend and I went back inside, again locking all the doors and trying to sleep. The next day we were leaving, and while we survived the night, I didn't feel right in the cabin anymore. It was forever the spooky cabin in my head, and I really wanted to leave. As we packed, we heard the same noise we heard at 3 a.m. Oh, it was the heater. A heater that sounds just like a garage. The sound lasts the same duration. My boyfriend looked at me and immediately said, "You need to give up your murder shows," and walked away. As if. As for the banging on the balcony, it was just the perfectly timed fall of the pine cone. I promise I'm not paranoid. I think back on this story a lot, and I'm actually pretty embarrassed about how little came of it, but I'm also incredibly grateful for the same reason. But whoever drove onto the property and walked around, thank you for triggering all of my nightmares. Please stay home. And yeah, let's not meet. My husband grew up in Scotland, and his parents, Fiona and Angus, still lived there. On weekends, they stay at their spacious house in the Scottish Highlands, but during the work week, they stay at their tiny, utilitarian row house in Aberdeen. The house is a renovated former fishing cottage in a long row of similar cottages that sit right up on the North Sea. The neighborhood is picturesque, with cobblestone streets, and my parents-in-law have occasionally been going about their business in their tiny kitchen/living room and had to shoo out a clueless foreign tourist who barged in thinking their house must be some kind of museum or attraction. As you can tell from that last bit, my husband's folks used to be pretty lax about locking their doors at night. That is, until the incident I'm about to relate. They were sound asleep in the small bedroom of the Aberdeen house, and my father-in-law suddenly came awake with the sick feeling that something was wrong. It was dark and his eyes were still blurry from sleep, but as he scanned the room, he detected a slight movement at the foot of my bed. By this time, my mother-in-law had woken up too, and she gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. His eyes had adjusted to the dark now and made out the unmistakable figure of a man in dark clothing, standing between the bed and the doorway. Angus is a former military man, and he's seen his share of mayhem. He jumped out of bed, fists balled up and ready to go, and yelled, "What the heck are you doing in our house?" The intruder just stood there looking at him, as if trying to make up his mind about something. After a moment or two of silence, the man then said quietly, "Wrong house, sorry," and simply turned around and walked out. Angus followed to make sure he actually left and deadbolted the door behind him. "Man, call the police," Fiona said, turning on her bedside light. But when they picked up the phone, it was dead. Angus went to check, heart in his throat, in case the intruder was still lurking nearby, and their phone lines had been cut. If my father-in-law hadn't woken up and interrupted their intruder, I can only imagine what might have happened. Needless to say, now they always lock their doors. This is much more strange than scary, but unnerving nevertheless. This past weekend, I went out on a date with an old friend from high school and was dropped back off at home at around 11:30 p.m. I live in a 2-story apartment building located near the outer edge of town in a small residential area, and usually by this time the streets are empty and it's very quiet. I entered inside through the front door and began up the stairs. I was 3 or 4 steps from the top of the stairwell when I saw somebody I've never seen before sitting down on the floor with his back leaning against my apartment door, looking down at what I first thought was a phone that was actually a box cutter, which he was playing around with. I was flabbergasted and quietly asked if he would move so I could get inside, but he didn't acknowledge my existence. I quietly walked back down the stairs and knocked on a fellow tenant's door, but didn't get an answer. I tried again on 3 others when someone finally came to. I told him about the creepy dude with the box cutter, and he agreed to help me out and to have the police on the phone if anything were to escalate or if the man refused to leave. We both went up the stairs, and the guy was still there messing around with his box cutter. I stood there observing while the other tenant demanded that he move out of the way or else. Once again, no answer. Not even a change in facial expression. I walked back down the stairs and dialed the closest department, and they were going to send a trooper over as soon as they could. After sitting outside for a few minutes and still talking to dispatch, the man must have finally realized that he wasn't welcome, and I watched as he walked right past me out of the apartment building and onto the street before disappearing into the distance. When the police arrived, they took statements from me and the other tenant while another one of their units drove around to try and locate the man, which they did. However, because he wasn't breaking any laws, they weren't able to take action against him, but assured us that he would be charged with trespassing if he ever comes back. I've been working for an independent hotel for just over 4 years now. We're the #1 rated hotel in our city and proud of it. I mostly work in housekeeping, but have done some time at the front desk as well. I love my job and have always said that my bosses are great. Now, being a housekeeper, I've seen some things though. I've seen a room where somebody snuck in their dog, kitten, and chicken. We don't allow pets. I even once had a room that I was cleaning as a stayover that had tripods set up around the bed, professional camera equipment cases, an adult-sized pacifier on site, and extra large-sized children's diapers. The 2 people that were in that room were in their early 20s. I even had a room once that we had to call the cops on for a raid because we found meth. They found a lot of drugs and guns in that room. But today's the first time I've ever actually felt scared to be in a guest's room. As I'm working on a room that's already been vacated, a man in the next room over catches me at my supply cart. He's set to be staying for several days and tells me, "You can go ahead and clean my room now. I'm going down for breakfast." Excellent. I love getting my stakeovers done early on. It makes things much easier for the people working laundry the sooner we get the dirty laundry down to them. So I pop over into his room, opening it up and propping the door open with a stopper like we always do. The first thing I notice is that he has around 20 prescription pills lined up on one of the 2 beds, along with insulin and needles. I'm a bit nosy, I'll admit it, and I wanted to see what he was on. Oddly, it was only 2 different types of medication for all 20 bottles. About 2/3 were a diabetes medication and the rest were a cholesterol medication. That's a little weird that he had so many bottles of the same meds, but whatever. I go to make the bed and see that some of the bedding has been stained, and I sigh, knowing now that I'll have to change all the bedding instead of just being able to turn down the sheets and blanket. So I leave the room, closing it behind me to go get the linens I need, and then head right back to the room. I prop the door open again and head to set the clean linens on the desk chair when I see out of the corner of my eye 2 notes sitting on the TV stand. It wouldn't mean anything except that I caught the word "kill" scrawled on it. I dropped the linens and took a closer look. What I read on the first note made my blood run cold. "You don't have to forgive her. You can just kill her. You are here to take money and alcohol away from you. Get over having to kill her and you can safely leave." My heart was pounding. My eyes went to the second note, which had just looked like a to-do list at first glance, but in the end made my stomach churn. Spray and wash. Apply for Medicare. Insubordination. The soul is healed by being with children. Bank card follow-up. Inheritance. Savings. Hawaii Pop. Map Montana. There will be a day of reckoning. Did you tell Mom what I said? How did Bev get my address? It was too much. I quickly snapped pictures of them on my phone so I could show my boss why I would not clean his room. I left the room quickly, closing it up behind me. As the door closes, I turn and I see the man just 10 feet away from me, coming back to his room. My heart is in my throat, but I manage to smile and tell him, I need more supplies. I'll be back to your room in a bit. I take off straight for the elevator, having noticed our maintenance man waiting for the slow transport. In a hushed tone, I tell him what I found and he sees I'm shaken. Not a normal state for me. He rides down with me and I go straight to my boss and tell her that for the first time in all these years, I am not comfortable being in a guest's room. I show her the pictures and her face is still and pale. She goes to the front desk and asks our general manager for a minute of her time and brings her into the office to show her. She agreed this was not a safe situation and took our maintenance men with her to go inform the man he had 1 hour to get his belongings and leave the hotel, and he was not welcome back. I spent a few minutes in the laundry room trying to calm down. Then my boss went back up with me to the floor until the man was officially out of the hotel. I don't know who Bev is. I don't know who the woman is that he didn't feel he needed to forgive. But to the man in room 422, let's never meet again. When I was around 22, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place. So, I was in Harlan, Iowa at the time. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined with me. I believe there were 4 of us, 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and was watching TV in the hotel breakfast area. Somebody was also down there, nearby, a guy. When he looked at me, I said, "Good morning," as I do whenever I go, just to be friendly. He said it back and we had a polite exchange. Something you would do with a stranger you never thought you would see again. He mentioned he was staying there with his team for a construction job. I go to leave and I say something very casual. "Have a good one. See you later." He said something like we could hang out later. I didn't think anything of it and just brushed it off like, yeah, maybe. I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but as I didn't work until 11 a.m., we tend to work from like 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., give or take, depending on the size of the church. I decided to go take a nap since I didn't sleep well the night before. While lying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls to my room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that ever, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody would answer. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I left my room and saw the guy was there in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking anything of it. He asked where I was going, and I said I had to go to work. My friend showed up, a female photographer, and I went with her to her car as I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about getting strange phone calls, and she mentioned she did as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door, watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were chances for tornadoes, so we kept tabs with each other. Eventually, I go to my room for the night, and I heard a knock on my door. I didn't really want to answer it. However, I did, cracking the door to see who it was. It was that guy from earlier. He talked about how I said we could hang out, and I told him I was too tired after working all day, and I really wanted to sleep. I shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still the night, but I recall him knocking again, but I wouldn't answer. I pretended to either be out or sleeping. I called my mom and started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I almost acted like I wasn't when speaking with her. Suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second. I need to check something." I tiptoe as quietly over to my bedroom door as possible. I look out of the peephole and I see him. I then see him turn his head to my door as if he were listening for something. My heart started to race. I then saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes goes in for the doors, so there is like an indentation in the hallway for each room? Well, he goes to the wall away from the room that juts out. I think he thought he was hiding because he would try to lean his head, around the corner of the jutting out portion, as if listening for something. I walked to the furthest side of my room quietly and whispered to my mom about how I'm scared. I called the front desk to complain, like my mom suggested. I can't remember if I also texted my friend or called her, but she also complained to the front desk about the various phone calls she received. Eventually, we were given new rooms, and the construction group manager was told by the hotel about one of his guys, and that creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they all said if we needed to stay with them, we could. All very nice, but still all strangers to me, and I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, as I didn't see him after that. I was a little bit jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room and I didn't, but it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said.